I get it's an interesting service. I'm sure at 23, I would have loved to go to Fort Lauderdale and party there. But like, how do you get this to be something that at $1 billion valuation or whatever Andreessen funded it at, that it can actually be a 10, 20, $50 billion type opportunity?
That's why I think this is sort of actually a really good founder opportunity fit, because you kind of need someone who is a bit of a lunatic to pull this off.
Yeah.
They are really trying to create this hospitality-like consumer brand for residential.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as I sort of think about like what the potential use case is in these different neighborhoods, and you sort of talk about the long-term stay component of it, Airbnb has really traded off. Like there is some uniqueness to Airbnb, right? But you don't get the consistency, and there's no community associated with it, right? And so I guess I was kind of thinking about, hey, if you could do, and we're seeing more and more people in their 20s want to spend, summers in Miami or LA, or winters in Miami or LA, and then summers in New York or wherever, right? And so I guess as I sort of thought about what the idealized state of this is, let's throw the crypto thing to a side because whatever, I don't believe in that kind of stuff. So let's just throw that out because that's distracting. But if you sort of think about like the utility of it, I kind of get it, right? Like I kind of think, oh, well, if I can have the exact same room in, I don't know about Fort Lauderdale, but in Miami as I do in New York, and there's a community in each place, and I'm 24 and we can go out together, I guess I kind of understand it. And it seems like the guy that was passing, Maureen, I'm sure you remember these stories or have all these stories, but the guy that's passing tequila shots around at like 2 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon is probably like a good person to enable this, right? I guess where I keep going back to is like, does the math actually hold? It feels like kind of a financial engineering, like, yes, there's this community element of it, right? Yes, there's this visionary funding element of it, but it feels like there's going to be a lot of like tactical financial operations associated with, how to lever these things, how to actually structure the individual tenants. Like one of the advantages of selling B2B is that, these leases can be a couple years versus when you're dealing with consumers, they're going to be much more fickle and you're dealing with credit reports and all that stuff. And so it just feels like a super complicated thing to get to the big pie at the end. Is that fair? Like this just seems like a very hairy problem that sounds good, but like might be really hard to execute on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, residential management is hard. This is a hard business. And here's an example. In residential, when you're dealing with long-term leases, occasionally people stop paying and you have to evict them. That is part of the process. That is part of the business. If you're Greystar, if you are a huge property manager, you evict people all the time, nobody thinks about it. The first time somebody gets evicted from Flow, they are going to go to the press, and it's going to be a whole cycle of Adam Newman is evicting tenants.
It's the Waymo driving problem. Like one car, people die in car accidents all the time, but one Waymo car kills one person, and like everyone, that's headlines everywhere. So
I'm interested from an investment perspective now, a little bit understanding the personalities of behind these firms. Like, I guess Logan, isn't this a huge risk from a reputation perspective? Like, why would Andreessen do this?
It's an interesting question. I've seen a bunch of people say like, oh, Andreessen erased 12 years or 14 years of building a brand in one investment. And I actually, from my very cynical, like watching the machinations of the venture industry, I actually feel like this is one of the most logical investments I've seen because, well, two things. One, I think Founders Fund has done a really good job of cornering hey, we back ambitious founders going after crazy ideas, and we will never replace you and all of that. And I think to some extent they did it in the Palmer Luckey thing, right? And his next act with Anduril after Oculus, they did it with Parker Conrad after Zenefits, right? And they've really leaned into that brand. And to some extent, I feel like Andreessen Horowitz has almost suffered on the other end of that, especially with the Parker stuff, right? And so to some extent, in a very cynical way, I think that this is actually a perfect reclaiming of some element of that. When I was thinking, when someone asked me who would have looked at this deal, I was like, Well, Andreessen Horowitz did it. Founders Fund's the only other one that I can think would have even possibly touched this, like had enough money to do it, like touch the ambitions of this and all of that. And so from a branding standpoint, I actually think it's great, and they have a lot of money. And as Brad mentioned, like this is an enormous market, and who knows what the terms of the structure around all this stuff are. And so, I mean, one of the things that they just do, Andreessen Horowitz specifically does such a good job of, is just like being on everyone's lips on a very regular basis, right? And just like constantly, all these things get repositioned as they're reinventing X or Y, and like they became an RIA, and that became like they're reinventing the venture model and all these things. And so from a marketing standpoint, I feel like it's really logical for them. And then from a ambitions and founder type standpoint, I think it makes a lot of sense that like they would be the ones to want this type of person in their tent. Now, from an investment standpoint, does it actually make sense? I don't. That's where you really need to squint for me. But all the other things I think are super like if this were 50 million, whatever they have, 6 billion, 50 of 60, 50 million of 6 billion, I'd be like, great, biggest check ever. That's where I don't understand, but maybe there's some structure to it that, there's more than meets the eye there.
So Logan, that I think that's interesting and sort of, I don't know, a little bit terrifying to me in terms of just like the founder friendliness, because I think that's something we explored so much in the book, just like how far the pendulum had swung. It seems like and granted, I've been on maternity leave for the last few months as things have gotten really crazy. But that things have swung back, and there's been maybe like a little more sanity in the market of not just giving that was the problem with all this, giving Adam Newman carte blanche and no one giving him any boundaries. So it's scary to me, but also getting your rationale, knowing how things work. But all that said is, first of all, I just find the margins are thin on this business at the end of the day. So I get, Brad, like the TAM and the community, and I get what you were saying earlier, Logan. Like, even if I was, I could imagine there being a huge market for this, but I still don't get how you make money, and I think that's in a big way, or how you ever get a tech multiple for this. Oh, and then one other point, this is my speculation, but when you say it could have been Founders Fund or Andreessen Horowitz, I sort of bet, just knowing Adam Newman, again, pure speculation, I haven't had a chance to report on this, nor I don't know if I will, but I kind of picture him and Mark just bonding, having conversations, rather than him sort of taking this to people, but it like them brainstorming and coming together, and Adam almost having the leverage to say, like, I have all my own money from SoftBank gave me, from WeWork, and that SoftBank gave me to leave. I'll just pay for it myself, and that's his leverage there. And he's like, I don't even need money, but sure, if you'll give it to me, I'll let you be part of this. Like,
I do think he ultimately did need some brand validation, and Andreessen Horowitz, like what is venture capital in general, but some level of brand validation and hopefully some support and advice and comfort along the way, right? And like, I guess you could say, I would be very interested in what the board structure and governance of this is, because you could argue either side of who needed who more. Did Adam Newman need Mark Andreessen and the stamp of the biggest check ever coming in after he was disgraced? He didn't commit fraud, right? We can talk about a bunch of the stuff that he did, but like disgraced might be too strong of a word, but at a minimum, he got removed from his company. Or did Andreessen, he is this high profile, a top 10 most famous CEO like in the world right now. And, I don't know. It would be very interesting to see, like, does Newman have 100% control of the board because he's this famous CEO that built this company? Or, did he touch the stove last time? And so they wrestled control, and there needs to be checks and balances. I don't know. It's an interesting thing.
That's a great point too, that like the buzz and why we're all like questioning this and intrigued and everything is like the Andreessen Horowitz. If he put $1 billion into this, we wouldn't. You're right. This is like a stamp of something. Like he's truly back, and someone with a big name is willing to take a bet on him.